Hello, everybody. I've been asked to give a reflection this Good Friday um, about my kind of spiritual journey, really, in the last month. And I'm speaking to you. My name's Sarah, and I'm a member of the congregation at St Luke's. I've also experienced COVID-19 in a moderately severe way without actually having to go to hospital over the last month. I'm also a doctor in the NHS, a senior psychiatrist. So I hope you'd be interested in my own spiritual journey and reflections during this time. So interestingly enough, the Good Friday falls a month after the World Health Organization declared coronavirus a pandemic, and 4 weeks after Boris first briefed us from Downing Street on the gravity of the COVID situation. So literally that weekend, just after that Downing Street briefing, I began to notice some mild symptoms over the weekend: a sore throat, some extreme thirst, a bit of a dizzy head. But I laughed it off and put it down to anxiety with the emerging gravity of the situation. But Richard, my husband, was also becoming unwell as well. So we'd also been advised at that time to self-isolate for 7 days if we felt unwell. So on the Monday, I was feeling slightly worse, feeling like I probably couldn't really be at work anyway. My head wasn't quite in the right place, and I felt like I was about to get flu or something. So I had to call in sick, which is quite a big deal for me because I never go off sick. And I felt quite guilty about that as well, because I could see that the NHS was going into war footing. Then literally our inboxes were just full of COVID planning, advice, and lots of emails. So I felt a bit bad going off, but I needed to because I was unwell and I needed to self-isolate. And during that week, I don't know where God was. God wasn't really anywhere. I felt very stressed and anxious, probably as a lot of us have been experiencing. And also, Richard and I, being doctors, have a lot of old good friends and relatives that are doctors. So we were getting some inside stories from what was going on in Italy and the hospitals there before it had actually hit the news here. So I think we also knew that situation was definitely coming this way as a country, I think before a lot of other people had realised that gravity. So there was a huge amount of anxiety. I felt a bit angry that I couldn't get in touch with God. I felt like a fair weather Christian that can only get in touch with God through nature or through lovely worship or through love or through fellowship with people, and that somehow where was God in all of this when we were kind of isolated with this crisis going on and people dying. Richard and I, despite that, kept up our spiritual practices, some contemplation and prayer, but I didn't really feel it. I felt that I was going through the motions. As we got towards 7 days of this, I knew that we were coming towards a crossroads in this journey. I think people are probably aware that if you have a milder form of the illness, often people start just feeling better and they shrug it off after 7 days. And I think that was the hope, and probably will be for most people. Or you can start to feel worse at that time. So I was praying and waiting to start feeling a little better, but at that time my symptoms got quite a lot worse. I started to experience a headache that lasted about 4 days. My temperature was going up in the evenings. I was experiencing breathlessness walking around the house, going upstairs, and I had a sense of pressure on my chest. Calling 111 for reassurance or some kind of medical advice, even if a nurse or anybody, we couldn't get through after waiting 2.5 hours to try and get through. An algorithm was telling me to call an ambulance, but I didn't feel quite that was the right thing either. I didn't quite feel that bad. If you know me, you'd know I probably would have to be unconscious to call an ambulance. So, a glass of wine and some comedy, although the wine felt like vinegar. And I felt really angry and stressed about not being able to get any medical help. And again, I couldn't really have any sense of God in all of this. the next couple of evenings, things got progressively worse, and we'd had a pulse oximeter had arrived through the post by then, and Richard was listening to my chest dutifully, even though we're not very good at listening to chests because we haven't done it for 30 years, and we've got a stethoscope in the house. And the third evening of feeling bad, I could see from Richard's face that he was a bit worried, but he was telling me that he was hearing that I was okay, but I could kind of tell that he thought I wasn't. And then we put the pulse ox on, that was dipping a bit as well. So I just want to go to bed and sleep. I collapsed into bed on my stomach, and I felt like the fatigue that I had felt like I would imagine people have when they're dying of cancer or they're on chemotherapy. It was so profound, and I couldn't really think. It was an effort to think, never mind move. And I collapsed onto the bed and had some thoughts going through in my head about hospital, shouldn't ventilate. And then I don't know quite what happened, or whether, I don't think I did anything. I think God showed me he was there. He came to me within. I felt myself just giving up and saying, whatever is your will, Lord, whatever is your will in this. And I felt this real sense of peace come upon me, the kind of peace my body was craving for. I think I needed to not be moving at all to conserve oxygen, but this profound sense of peace. And also I could see a very powerful light, and I just felt this real sense of God within. And I realised that if I did end up going off to hospital or on a ventilator or worse, that it wouldn't matter if my family or anybody wasn't with me, because God was with me and was there and would be and was and is. And it was just so comforting and allowed me just to fall into the deep, deep sleep I needed. And I woke the next day feeling a bit better, but that had been the pattern for quite a few days anyway. But that was the lowest point. I didn't dip back that badly, and I felt a real strong sense of God with me, and have done since. And then since then, I was another week and a half before I started getting back to work, which I've done this week, and I feel a real sense of God having led me through that, because I feel and have felt very needed this week at work, and I've cancelled leave anyway that I was going to have next week, and I'm now overseeing and supporting junior doctors who are all having to be rostered back to the acute trust or retrained, or their roles are changing, and we're having acute medical patients on our psychiatric ward. So I feel I've got a role in all of this, and I would just say I felt very emotionally numb, completely emotionally numb, until today, where I felt overwhelmed with tears of joy and relief. And the trigger for that was having to go into my workplace to pick up some prescriptions, and realising it was the first time I'd been out and into my car, and certainly into work for a month. And it just felt like reconnecting with the world, with my role, with my job, or being useful in some way, and brought a brief reconnection with my emotions that had been very dulled. But I do thank God in all of this. Amen.